Good day everyone. So for today we're going to have a discussion in General Biology 2. Specifically, we're going to discuss about our lesson number 5 entitled Regulation Supply Process, and we're going to be focusing more on the nervous control. So before we proceed to our discussion for this morning, so let's have a quick recap all about our topic last meeting. So last meeting, we have discussed all about our lesson number 4, which discusses more about the transportation in plants. Okay, so we all know that in plants we do have here two transport system, and it includes the first one is the xylem. So xylem is an organ of the plant that is responsible for transporting water molecules and minerals, while the phloem, it is an organ of a plant that is responsible for transporting all of the nutrients and specifically the food. To be specific, we have the carbohydrates. Okay, so carbohydrates is the end product of the process of photosynthesis. With that, we can say that in the xylem transport system, so this is a one-way transport wherein the water molecules goes upward. Well, in phloem transport, we do have here two-way process wherein right after we produce or we consume or we gain the right amount of the carbohydrates, we're gonna be using that carbohydrates and we're gonna be sharing it to all of the organs of the plants, and it will prepare them in order for them to carry out the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so that is our discussion last meeting. So for today we're going to have another discussion. So this is all about the nervous control, specifically uh, the nervous system. Okay, so we have here our objectives. Okay, so at the end of the lesson, you should be able to number one, to understand the role of the nervous system in controlling the different biological functions. Number two is to identify the major parts of the brain and explain their functions. And number three is to explain the structure of a neuron, a nerve, and describe the conduction of impulse through a nerve fiber. Okay, so next we have here our test yourself. Again, test yourself is intended for us to know if you have prior knowledge all about the topic, but since I will not be able to meet you, so I'll be the one to answer it. Okay, so in here, I'm going to fill in the blanks to complete the concept map. Okay, so first one we have here the term nervous control. Under the term nervous control, we have here the nervous system. Okay, so remember that nervous system is responsible for the nervous control. Okay, number two, we have here two types of nervous system or two parts of the nervous system. First one is the CNS and the other one is the PNS, wherein CNS is the central nervous system while PNS is the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so under the CNS or the central nervous system, we do have here the brain and then the spinal cord. Under peripheral nervous system, we have here um, the motor or the efferent pathway, and then the other one is the sensory and then the afferent pathway. Okay, so under the motor or the efferent pathway, we have here voluntary movement, and number five is involuntary movement. Okay, so again, number one, nervous system. Number two is CNS or central nervous system. Number three is the spinal cord. Okay, number four is the afferent sensory pathway or sensory, and we're gonna be focusing on the afferent pathway. Number five is involuntary movement. Okay, so next we have here. Okay, so next we have here the terms that we're gonna encounter as we go on to our discussion. Okay, so the first one is the neurons. Okay, so neurons, by definition, is the basic cell of the nervous system. So it is responsible for transmitting signals by electrochemical processes. Okay, number two is the dendrite. So it serves as the receiver of signals. Well, next one we have here the axon. So, axon serves as the carrier of the signals to other neurons or cells. Okay, so next one is the unipolar neurons. Okay, so unipolar neurons are sensory neurons in which it receives the stimuli. Okay, so next we have here the multipolar neurons. Okay, so these are motor neurons usually connected to muscles to make them contract and move. Okay, well, the next one is the bipolar neurons. Okay, so next one is the bipolar neurons. Again, bipolar neurons are interneurons that usually bridge and process message from sensory neurons to the motor neurons. Okay, so next we have here the cerebrum. Okay, so the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and also the center of sensory, perception, memory, thought, and personality. Okay, next is the cerebellum. Okay, so cerebellum is the part of the brain that controls motor function such as balance and body coordination. Okay, so next we have here the medulla oblongata. Okay, so medulla oblongata is a cone-shaped mass in the brain stem responsible for the involuntary movements. Okay, so again, those are the terms that we're gonna encounter as we go on to our discussion later on. Okay. Okay, so before we start the discussion all about the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, so let's discuss first the term regulation. Okay, so in here, regulation is a process that allows an organism to control body process as circumstances for change. Okay, so here's our example. So we have here, you sweat on a hot day to try to regulate your body temperature. Okay, so in here, as you can see, there is a man that is sweating during a hot weather. So in here, it says that this man regulates his body temperature. Okay, so with that, what is regulation? So the importance, or I mean, what is the importance of the regulation? Okay, so body regulation serves or lets our body to undergo the process of homeostasis. Okay, so homeostasis is any self-regulating process by which an organism tends to maintain stability while adjusting to conditions that are best for its survival. Okay, so with that, if homeostasis is successful, life continues. If it's unsuccessful, it results in a disaster or death of the organism. Meaning to say, uh, in homeostasis, we are maintaining our temperature. Aside from that, we are also maintaining all of the process that happens in our body. Okay, so through a successful homeostasis, okay, so we are going to successfully continue our lives. Okay, we can carry out all of the processes starting from the cell, the tissues, up to the body or the body organ. And if it's unsuccessful, or if we don't maintain the homeostasis of the body, so um, it results to different diseases, or worst case scenario, it can cause death. Okay, so that is the importance of regulation in our body. Okay, so next naman we have here regulations of life process. Okay, so um lab process. So we have here different lab process. So here are the basic lab process that we have. So we have the organization, metabolism, responsiveness, movements, and reproduction. So with that, the body functions of all organisms proceed through different modes of control and coordination. Complex animals have evolved a system for coordinating, controlling, and regulating the functions of different systems of the body. Okay, so with that, life process. is very important to carry out it. It is important for us in order for us to carry out our daily life activities. Okay, so it helps all the humans or all of the living organisms to produce the right amount of energy and also to maintain the homeostasis of the body. So always remember that life processes rather help us or help our body to survive with the changes in the environment. Okay, so always remember that a slight disturbance in any of the life process disturbs the entire functioning of the body. So, in here, we can say that all of the life process are interconnected with each other. Okay, so they are helping each other or each process in order for it to carry out the right function for us humans or for all of the living organisms. Okay, so without it, we cannot survive all of the changes that might happen in the environment. Okay, so what are the life process that happens in our body? So we have here different life process, but I only uh gathered those basic ones. Okay, so we have here the first one is the nutrition, next is the transportation, next is the respiration, next is the excretion, next is the reproduction, next is the metabolism. More on. So with that, we can say that metabolism and nutrition happens more on the digestive system, while transportation it happens on the circulatory system. Okay, respiration happens in the respiratory system. Excretion as well happens in the digestive system, or in some parts it happens on the excretory system. So in excretory system, it is a system that helps us to produce sweat, tears. Okay, so all of the products of the body. And then reproduction, so it happens primarily on the reproductive system. Okay, so that is the life process that very important in order for us to survive. Okay, or to carry out our day-to-day activities. Okay, so next we have here, so under the regulations apply process, we do have here two. Okay, so the first one is the nervous control, and the other one is the chemical control. So what is nervous control? So nervous control is brought about by special type of cells called the neurons. Okay, so next naman we have here the chemical control. Okay, so chemical control is brought about by chemical substances called the hormones. Okay, so in the nervous control, so it is um, controlled by the nervous system, while chemical control it is controlled by the endocrine system. Okay, so next naman, in the nervous system, so or the nervous control, so it involves the nervous system. So we do have here the brain, the spinal cord, and then the nerves. While in chemical control, so we have here the involvement of all the endocrine glands. Okay, so we will be discussing that next week. Okay, so right now we're gonna be focusing only on the nervous control. Okay, so next we have here the definition for the nervous control, since this is a topic for today and this is what we're gonna be focusing more of. Okay, so we have here the definition and the functions of the nervous control. Okay, so in the nervous control, so it uses signaling or the neural impulses. Okay, so it is controlled by our nervous system. Okay, so always remember that the nervous system is a complex collection of nerves, specialized cells known as the neurons that transmit signals between different parts of the body. Okay, so the nervous system is divided into two main parts. Primarily, we have the central nervous system or the CNS, and number two is the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so what is the importance of the nervous system since it is responsible aside from controlling our nervous control. So the nervous system transmits signals between the brain and the rest of the body, including the internal organs. In this way, the nervous system's activity controls the ability of all the living organisms to move, breathe, see, think, and many more functions. Okay, so the basic unit of the nervous system is a nerve cell called the neuron. Okay, so neuron is responsible for transmitting all of the electrical signals all throughout the body in order for us to have a response to specific stimuli. Okay, so with that, what is a neuron? Okay, so neurons is the basic cell of the nervous system. So it is responsible for transmitting all of the signals that is produced by the body in terms of the electrochemical processes. Okay, so under the microscope, so it is consists of three parts. Okay, so we have the cell body, the dendrite, and then the axon. Okay, so with that, the cell body is also called as the soma. Okay, so it is the spherical part of the neuron that contains the nucleus. Okay, so in the cell body, what we're gonna be remembering here is it contains the nucleus. Okay, so next we have here the dendrites. Okay, so dendrites receives electrochemical impulses from other neurons and carry them inward and toward the cell body. Okay, so in here, dendrites always receives all of the impulses from the neuron. Okay, and then they're going to carry dot impulses inward and outward the cell body. Okay, so next we have here the axon. Okay, so axon on the other hand is responsible for carrying the impulses away from the cell body and sends information to other neurons. Okay, so meaning to say, in dendrites, it only transmits the signals from the neurons inward and outward the cell body. So it does not contain or it is not connected to other neurons. Well, in the axon, so it has involvement of other neurons. Okay, so axon is responsible for connecting one neurons to another neurons by the means of sending impulses. Okay, so next, what is the importance of neurons? Okay, so always remember that neurons are responsible for carrying information throughout the human body using electrical and chemical signals or the electrochemical signals. They help coordinate all of the necessary functions of life. Okay, so always remember that neurons, it is very important because without it we cannot respond to certain stimuli. Okay, so that is the importance of the neurons. Later on we're gonna be knowing more on the response and stimuli. Okay, so next we have here different types of neurons. Okay, so again, neurons is the basic cell of the nervous system that transmits signals by electrochemical process. So we do have here three types of neurons. Okay, so first one is the multipolar neuron, next is the unipolar neuron, next is the bipolar neuron. So we do have here three types of neurons, and yung tatlong and those three types of neurons, its function is the first one. The multipolar neurons are motor neurons usually connected to muscles to make them contract and to move. Okay, so multipolar neurons is to muscle contraction. Okay, so next naman we have here unipolar neurons. Okay, so unipolar neurons are sensory neurons in which it receives all the stimuli. Okay, so multipolar neurons is to muscle contraction, while unipolar neurons is to stimuli receiver. Okay, so next we have here the bipolar neurons. Okay, so bipolar neurons are interneurons that usually bridge and process message from sensory neurons and motor neurons. Okay, so with that, bipolar neurons is responsible for connecting the sensory neuron and the motor neurons all together in order to process all of the messages or all of the signals that comes from a specific neuron. Okay, so next we have here this is what I'm talking about, the examples of stimulus or stimuli and response. Okay, so first one, when you hear a noise you turn your head in that direction. Let's say for example someone called your name, so you're going to find the direction where the voice came from. Okay, so the stimulus would be the noise, and in response you're going to turn your head on that direction. Okay, so next one, when you touch something hot, you pull your hand away. Okay, so for the stimulus, so our stimulus in here, okay, is the heat, and our response is to pull away. Okay, so let's say for example the moment that you touch a hot food, okay, or a hot plate, okay, so all you need to do is to pull away your hand because your hands might get burned. Okay, so that is the stimulus and response. Okay, so with that, we can say that stimulus and response are the electrochemical uh, signals that comes from the neurons. Okay, and it is transmitted all throughout the body. Okay, just like in this example, so example number one, they are transmitting the stimuli or the stimulus to your ear, and then in response you are going to turn your head in that direction. Well, on second example, our stimulus or the one that will be reacting to a specific stimulus is your hand, and by that response, you're going to pull away your hand. Another example of stimuli and their responses would be the first one is if you're hungry, so you eat some food. Okay, so with that, our stimulus would be being hungry. In response, we're gonna be eating some food. Okay, so next naman, another example, if you are cold, so you put on a jacket. So the stimulus would be feeling cold. So in response, you are going to put on your jacket. Okay. So next, another example would be if it starts raining, so you take out an umbrella. So the stimulus is the rain. Okay. So the response would be taking out the umbrella. Okay. So that is an example of or another example for the response and stimulus. Okay, so next we have here the central nervous system. What is central nervous system? Okay, so the central nervous system or the CNS is comprised of the brain and the spinal cord. The three broad functions of the CNS are to take in the sensory information, process information, and to send out motor signals. Okay? So the CNS or the central nervous system receives sensory information from the nervous system and controls the body's responses. Okay? So again, the central nervous system is consists of the human brain as well as the spinal cord. Okay, so the human brain is an organ or a complex organ that is responsible for controlling our thoughts, memories, emotion, the sense of touch, motor skills, vision, temperature, hunger, breathing, and every process that regulates our body. Okay? Kumbaga, this is central processing unit of our body. Okay, so next we have here the spinal cord. Okay, so the spinal cord is responsible for connecting the brain to your lower back. Okay, so always remember that the spinal cord carries all the nerve signals from your brain to your body and vice versa. So these nerve signals help you feel the sensations, and it also helps us to move our body. Okay, so always remember that any damages to your spinal cord can affect your movement or function. Okay, so as you can see in here, so if your C1 to C3 has been damaged, you will not be able to move your neck muscle. Okay, so next, if your L2 or the lumbar 2 has been damaged, you are not going to move your hips. Okay, so that will be the effect of having a damaged spinal cord to our body. Okay, so next we have here. Okay, so again, we have the human brain in here. Okay, so always remember that the human brain is the command center for the human nervous system. Okay, so all of the process that is being carried out by the nervous system is it is because of the brain. So brain is responsible for controlling the whole nervous system, or both the central nervous system as well as the peripheral nervous system. So with that, um, it plays a central role in the control of most bodily functions, including awareness, movements, sensation, thoughts, speech, and memory. Okay, so the brain has three major parts. So we have here the cerebellum, and then the brainstem. Okay, so with that, what is cerebrum? Okay, so cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. Its surface has numerous folds or wrinkles. It is the center of sensory, perception, memory, thought, and personality as well. Okay, so we have here the left cerebral hemisphere, or what we call the left hemisphere, and then we also have here the right cerebral hemisphere, or the right hemisphere. Okay, so left hemisphere, it is charged of the cognitive function such as speech and language, while the right hemisphere is more on creativity and face recognition. Okay, so as you can see in here, right cerebral hemisphere is responsible for the creativity, intuition, arts, creation, feeling, imagination, while the left hemisphere is responsible more on the analyzation or analysis, logic, idea, facts, mathematics, and the training. Okay, so always remember that the cerebrum is the biggest part of the brain, wherein it makes up the 85% of the brain's weight. Okay? So with that, the cerebrum is the thinking part of the brain, and it controls all your voluntary muscles. Okay? So with that, we have here different lobes of the cerebrum. Okay, so cerebrum have been known for its large, or having known for it is the largest part of the brain. It is folded into four different lobes. Okay, so those four lobes are lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and then the temporal lobe. Okay, so for the function, frontal lobe is important for the cognitive function and control of the voluntary movement or activity, while the parietal lobe processes information about temperature, taste, touch, and movement. Third one is the occipital lobe. It is primarily responsible for the vision. Next one is the temporal lobe. It is associated with processing auditory information and with the encoding of memory. Okay, so if you were to ask me, what is the most important lobe in all of the lobes of the cerebrum. So I would go for the frontal lobe, since it is responsible for the cognitive functions. Without it, we cannot make decisions, or we cannot uh, share our ideas or thoughts. Okay, so that's the reason why it is one, or it is considered as the most important lobe as compared to other lobes of the cerebrum. Okay, so another part of the brain is the cerebellum. Okay, so there's the cerebellum come or came from the Latin word that means the little brain, because it looks like a separate structure at the bottom of the brain. So this part of the brain controls all of the motor function, such as balance and body coordination. Okay, so with that, kanina we have talked about the cerebrum. Okay, so cerebrum makes up 85% of our brain, while cerebellum only makes up 10% of our brain size. Okay, although the cerebellum is much more smaller than the cerebrum. It contains significantly more nerve cells. Some estimates say that the cerebellum contains about 50% of the nerve cells that make up your brain. Okay, so although the size is very small, still it can do a lot of work. Okay, because it contains about 50% of the nerve cells that can be seen in our brain. Okay, so that's how important the cerebrum is. Okay, so next we have here the third part of the brain, which is the brainstem. So brainstem is a structure that joins the brain and the spinal cord. So it includes the midbrain. Okay, so the midbrain is associated with vision, hearing, alertness, sleep, wake patterns, and temperature regulations, while the pons, which literally means bridge, okay, relay signals to the thalamus. It is also associated with sleeping and dreaming, while medulla oblongata is responsible for involuntary movements, including the control of basic anatomical processes such as breathing, circulation, and digestion. Okay? So always remember that your brainstem is the bottom part of your brain. Okay? So it looks just like a stalk that connects the rest of your brain to your spinal cord. Okay, so the brainstem sends signals from your brain to the rest of the body. It controls many subconscious body functions like breathing and maintaining your heart rate. So with that, we can say that the three main parts of the brain is really important, because altogether they do different function, but um, those those function helps us to do our day-to-day functions. Okay, so next we have here under the central nervous system as well is the spinal cord. Okay, so the spinal cord is a tubular structure that extends from the medulla oblongata to the vertebral area. So the main function of the spinal cord is to send signals from the brain to the rest of the body. Okay, so we can say that the spinal cord is like a thick electrical cable that carries messages back and forth between your brain and your body. Okay, so with that, spinal cord is responsible for carrying out all of the messages that comes from the brain all throughout the body parts or the body organs. Okay, so that is the spinal cord. Next, we have here the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so the peripheral nervous system refers to the part of the nervous system outside the brain and then the spinal cord. So it includes the cranial nerves, the spinal nerves and their roots, and the branches and the peripheral nerves, as well as the neuromuscular junctions. Okay, so with that, the peripheral nervous system is consists of nerves arising from the brain and the spinal cord. So it includes as well the nerves. Okay, so nerves are cord-like structure whose primary role is to provide a pathway to conduct electrical impulses throughout the body. Okay, so we have here different pathways under the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so we have here the afferent sensory pathway. So afferent sensory pathways are neurons that carry nerve impulses from sensory stimuli towards the central nervous system and then the brain. Okay, so that is afferent sensory pathway. Okay, so next we have here the efferent motor pathways. So efferent motor pathways. So in here we have neurons that carry neural impulses away from the central nervous system and towards muscle to cause movement. Okay, so afferent, ang tatandaan dito, would be towards the central nervous system and brain, while the efferent, more on the impulses goes away from the central nervous system and it moves toward the muscle in order for the muscle to have movements. Okay, so with that, the main function of the peripheral nervous system are voluntary movements such as chewing food, walking, and facial expression. Okay, so the PNS also regulates autonomic functions such as breathing, heart rate, and digesting, or what we call the unconscious bodily behavior. Okay, so always remember that just like central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system is also important as well in order for us humans to survive. Okay, so with that, that is the importance of uh central the central nervous system all in all. Okay, so as you can see, the central nervous system do have many functions as well, just like the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so all in all, those parts of the nervous system gather together in order for us humans to do our function or to perform our task correctly. Okay, so with that, are we clear with our discussion? Okay, so if yes, so here are the instructions of our activity for our week number 5. So this one is written works number 5. So it includes two parts. So first part would be the essay part. Okay, so all you need to do is to answer the following comprehensively. Okay, so we do have here two sets of questions. Okay, so uh, uh all you need to do is to limit your answer into 5 sentences only. If you want to exceed more than that, so it's your choice naman. So for each question, so it is 5 points only for a total of 10 points. Okay, so for the identification, okay, so all you need to do is to identify the word being described in each statement. Okay, so write your answer on the answer sheet. So just like our essay part, the identification also has 10 points. Okay, so all in all, our activity number 5 or written works number 5 is consists of 20 points. Okay, so here are the references for today's discussion, and that's the end of our discussion. So with that, I hope you learned something today. Let's call it a day. Goodbye, class, and see you again next week. Bye bye. So, if you have questions or concerns, feel free to message me during our consultation hours. So, our consultation hours is Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Okay, so that will be all. Again, thank you for listening. Goodbye, class.